G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, where I filter out the propaganda and fake news to bring you detailed news and analysis of conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Actually, I was this close to giving up, but you've seen what happened to Charlie Kirk. Can we let that go unchallenged? Millions of people are now waking up. The left have done themselves a huge disservice. Now, as more information comes out, we'll learn the truth. I'm not going to fill in the gaps. What I know, I'll tell you. What I don't know, I can't tell you, but I will tell you that I don't have the answers to the questions. But we know the people are speculating that it has something to do with his recent statements. Before I get into that, I'd like to thank the patrons and other supporters who help make this channel possible. Now, YouTube, you may notice that I don't have all my videos on YouTube. And I don't have all my videos on Humble either. Since the beginning of this conflict, I have had so many of my videos taken down. I've had copyright strikes. I've had my YouTube channel hacked. I've definitely covered more topics in the past. I'm trying to cover as many different topics as I can, but I on the outset I promised to bring people news and analysis on the war. Now, a lot of people over the years have died needlessly because Biden just sat in his office and did nothing for 4 years. Literally, as bombs were falling, he was sitting on the beach, fucking around with an armchair, and not one word of criticism from the mainstream media. No special envoys, no mediators, nothing. And as for sanctions, those all came from Trump. He only extended them. He never added to them. There was no calls for more sanctions until Trump came back into office. Was it because everybody is politicizing this war? This ain't a war about Ukraine. You may think it is, but it's about Russia and about destroying Russia. And I know a lot of people out there are going to want Russia destroyed, but you will set a dangerous precedent. You've already set a dangerous precedent. Now, we have news of drones from Russia allegedly violating airspace. Yet, how did these drones fly all the way across Ukraine when those drones don't have the range to fly all the way across Ukraine? Now, yes, there's talk of Chinese carrier drones, but we haven't seen those. And nobody has produced evidence to show that these drones crossed where they came from, where they were launched, and who launched them. Remember, these are cheap drones, and Ukraine mass produces cheap drones. So does Russia. And these were fixed-wing drones. Ukraine and Russia produce fixed-wing drones. They claim 19 incursions of Polish airspace. Yet, How many of you remember the Polish missile incident, where a missile allegedly from Russia flew into Ukraine and later turned out to be an S-300 launched from Kiev? And it was just, oopsies! And then it went away, and then they brought back the story as a Russian incursion. It was definitely a Russian missile. How many false flags in the last decades? How often do we hear the story? The CIA had no involvement, had no knowledge, and then 20 years later when files are declassified, CIA's fingerprints all over it. Dozens of operations by the CIA, NSA. False flags have eroded trust in the American government. The lies about the Vietnam War, which the Democrats have successfully pinned on Nixon, of course, because that's what Democrats do. They always find a way, just like the Vietnam War. The Liberals started the Vietnam War and then passed it off to Republicans and then turned anti-war when the Republicans were anti-war. It's the same thing. Where's the anti-war mob? They're trying to push this narrative now of triggering Articles 4 and 5 to push for an attack for Trump to bomb Moscow and end this war once and for all. Ursula von der Leyen. Now, we know UK is in a terrible place economically, and we know France is on the verge of bankruptcy, and the French government has just fired. The French government is now talking about impeaching Macron as the only way out of the crisis to force a new election. Macron, of course, could step down, but that's not likely to happen. Instead, he's trying to find a new prime minister. But we have the Security Council holding emergency meetings, which are going to go nowhere. Again, the Polish are saying their airspace was violated. That Gorski is claiming Poland's getting a tsunami of declarations of support from allies. But this needs to be translated into facts. What do you mean translated into facts? What facts? Okay? We're a member of the UN, the EU and NATO. He's spoken to the council before that our arguments resonated, that we broke through. Yet they also don't mention the fact, however, that the last time he was at the UN Security Council, his lies were pointed out, that it was not a Russian missile, but a Ukrainian missile. He claims the attacks were deliberate, despite the fact that these drones don't have the range to reach Poland. He warned against suggestions that the drones were Ukrainian. I suggested yesterday that the drones might have flown over Ukraine and were jammed. But still, they should have fallen out of the sky when they ran out of fuel. They can't show the tracking of where these drones were launched from. That's suspicious. They said they spent 7 hours chasing down drones. Jets don't take 7 hours to fly across a few... You know how fast they're flying? They're flying at 700 miles an hour. In 7 hours. Yeah, action lasting 7 hours. Yeah, right. The whole night. Can't say it was an accident. Really, 19 violations. Several dozen drones identified. Yet we go to other media reports and they say only 3 were downed. But there was a massive attack on Ukraine, 415 drones and 40 cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. Where is the meeting from the EU? They were supposed to meet with Trump yesterday. Didn't happen. There was a phone call from Macron. That's about it. Europe is supposed to be organising a peace deal, sending a delegation to Trump about security guarantees for Ukraine. Instead, on the deadline of this meeting, we have a miracle. A drone attack. Oh no. Of course, most of the world doesn't mention that Ukraine fired 225 drones at a guided missile in the last 24 hours. But Poland, of course, is trying to make everything about them. Now, President Trump has spoken out and he wants an explanation. Now, if they are Russian, well, that's the thing. Are they Russian? Might as well just say it. He's calling them out, asking for proof. Of course, US Ambassador Windmaker has to say it. That we will defend NATO. I mean, of course US is going to defend NATO. But the problem is, NATO's trying to provoke a war. So there's no way we can take their word at it when they've lied twice in the past. But of course, all they want is concrete air defence. See, it always comes down to, whenever there is a deadline from Trump, Europe always has this fucking miracle that happens. Every time. Every time there's a peace deadline, Russia withdrew from Kiev. 6 weeks later, fighting resumes. What did Ursula von der Leyen do in that time? What did Merkel do? What did Macron do? What did the British do? They just sat there and did nothing. Rutte was in charge of the Netherlands at the time, I believe. They did nothing. Nothing. Johnson goes over there and gives Zelensky a pat on the back. So but still, no matter, you can't blame Boris Johnson. This comes down to Obama, Biden. What they do all that time? We're going to see. This is the problem of a war of words. We have now political violence to worry about. The left are so desperate to force this war with Russia. They're so desperate for power that they will go to any lengths now for power. The shooting of Charlie Kirk, on the same day, a miracle of miracles, that Russia can fire a drone all the way into Poland, and somehow we can't see the proof before they're demanding, not, you think if Russia attacked Poland, there would be troops mobilising, the United States would know, everybody would be clear and say, yes, we saw this drone coming, and we shot it down, and immediately respond. No, it said we see a war of words. Because it's not about triggering a direct war with Russia. Okay, they want Trump to do it. Okay, they want to break Trump. Okay, they want to be able to say, they want to break the right. Okay, they want to make us break our word on no more wars. Just like they broke Nixon, just like they broke every Republican president or murdered every Republican president. This is the problem, isn't it? If they don't get their way, they'll do anything. You have to stop believing the media and start looking for alternative answers and asking questions and saying, well, if you can't provide us with proof that Russia sent this drone, we cannot believe your word. Can you believe Macron? when he was called out by Italy and saying that, now, France has every right to conduct business. But I don't think, and I'm pretty sure, France has been completely honest about its business dealings when it was getting countries to pay in gold or at a fixed rate, and then France accumulating 7,000 ounces or something of gold in profit. That's ridiculous. But it's not much. I think it was I think it was both sides. You know, you have one side who doesn't want to pay their bills and another side who has outrageous interest rates. I think everybody has to take a step back and say, I think the world financial system is corrupt. And that there are many countries who don't pay their bills, which is why we're in a mess. We have countries accumulating debt that they can't afford. Remember, the French Revolution was caused by debt. The American Revolution, in part, was caused by debt. The British, if the British weren't so in debt, they wouldn't have put a unfair tax on the Americans. If it wasn't for their war with France, and if it wasn't for France and their desire to stick a knife in the English, they probably would have never funded the American Revolution. Let's be honest. The French Revolution, if anybody studied revolutionary tactics, you'll know Russia. What was the Russian Revolution cause? Debt. Who mismanaged the Russian economy? The Tsar? No, he was out of office already. It was actually the liberal government but liberals, like everything else, blamed the Russian Tsar to make peace with Stalin after their failed incursion into Crimea. Now, the British have always wanted to get hold of Crimea for a naval station in the Black Sea. It's ridiculous. Now, again, this comes down to sanctions. Zelensky wants more sanctions against Russia. So, he doesn't want peace. And does the UK want peace? No, they're going to build more drones. Despite the fact their country's in debt, that they can't pay their debts, that they're now looking for ways to save money, well, and now they're talking about cutting migrants because they can't afford the bills. Oh, what a shock. And they're having to cancel energy projects. What a shock. Because they haven't got the money for it. But again, what are they doing? No, they're going to send more money, more arms, and mass-produce drones to help Ukraine. The UK wants to turn its citizens into slaves. Debt. Every left-wing government is committed to more debt. If you haven't worked that out yet, that's why you should never vote. And we've seen how many weak governments. Europe, most of the right-wing governments are weak because they're not right-wing. They're full of lefties. Look at the Tories. Since the last Tory was Thatcher. The European Commission wants to go after China. Well, that's a fucking stupid thing. Resolve issues, okay? People, this is the problem. I think historically, We've seen this before. Unstable governments go to war. We saw this. Macedonia, Greece, Rome. For a while, heck, I can't think of exact examples, but I'm pretty sure 1924, before that, America's war on Spain. It was about looting it was about giving Americans the green light to go after Spanish gold ships, to bail America out on debt, and to seize Cuba. And the Philippines. I think Americans don't even know they seized the Philippines. But a lot of Americans don't even know they invaded Iran during World War II. Because that army never returned home, because they were recruited it was a foreign army recruited. Most of the veterans of the Iranian campaign died in North Africa and Europe. And after the Second World War, do you think they cared about the history books? I think a lot of people don't understand, right? You look at the map, quite simply. The loser of a war doesn't dictate the terms of a war. You don't get... If you want to keep getting involved in foreign wars, eventually foreign countries will band together against you. Your coups, your financial system, your wars created BRICS. I'm not saying BRICS is good. Biden admitted he helped Lula into office. And look at Brazil now. Look at the mess Brazil's in. Left-wing politicians after left-wing politician. Lula's going after his enemies, trying to jail them. Now we go and look at the map. Sorry, we're back to the war. We look at the map. There's clearly not a lot of the drone incursions aren't marked on the map. A lot of the explosions and battles aren't marked on the map. But what we do know is that Russia's expanded its territorial gains. A little bit here in the buffer zone in the north. They're still fighting they're still fighting. Russian Ministry of Defense puts troops in Kupiansk. Ukraine says on the outskirts of Kupiansk. But it's true. But let's say split the difference. They're fighting in the outer suburbs of Kupiansk. Okay, and the incursions are daily. Russian assault forces hit and run tactics to wear down the Ukrainian defenders. In other areas, there is fighting. The Russians have gained more territory north of Lyman. Very little happening around Seversk. A little bit more territorial gains north of Chasiv by the Russians. The assault forces breaking through various Ukrainian lines to create what they call a stabilization of forces. That is basically they create a straight line and dig in. So they've taken more territory. A little bit of territory here, but not much. Just again, it's significant. It looks significant at first, but remember this is mostly open ground. So really, it's just going around and securing trenches, mostly probably because it's they're clearing fields of mines. The Ukrainian defenders are down here and up here, although the Ukrainian positions are almost all but overrun. And just now there's fighting here appeared on the map. That says 3 hours ago. It just appeared. You saw it. I saw it. There's this fighting here and fighting here continuing. off and on throughout the day. The Russians have made a small breakthrough on the northern frontier, not much. And again, they stalled here in Pavosk. Sorry, and the Ukrainians have stopped the Russian advance, but they've lost territory. So again, the Russian advance has, however, switched gears west of Pavosk and taken more territory. The territorial gains here have halted. Looks like the Russians have, again, yep, they're back here, wiping out any of the previous Ukrainian gains and having taken more territory in other areas as well. Again, this is another backwards and forwards. Is fighting at Orsk, I think they actually say. Again, Ukrainian drones on both sides, mostly aimed at the desk, although other areas as well have been hit. Mostly, they're being shot down. Both sides have lost most of their drones. But both sides don't report everything that was hit. But there are lots of videos, but a lot of them are old. Like, God knows how many times Mariupol, Donetsk, and has been hit. And sometimes you hit explosions in Ukraine and you get explosions in Russia instead. Sometimes you get no results. It is weird. It's chaotic. The censorship is real. The access to information is difficult, particularly when some sites don't translate. Because a lot of them, like the Ukrainian sites here, they actually don't post text. They post... they'll post a GIF with text on it. But here we have General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports a whole bunch of contacts with no context. So you don't know how long, how many. And of course they keep saying that information would help the Russians. No, it won't. Russia knows what's there. Russia knows how many men they've sent and how many men they're facing, approximately. High altitude observation in this area, produce a detailed map, I approximate within 1 hour, of every square metre of Ukraine. High-speed analysis shows hotspots which individual intelligence would focus on. There's a good article, I think it was on the, however, it was on New York Times behind the paywall, using my, so I didn't read it all because I only got the free section, but basically, thermals changed. In the first year of the war, both sides were pretty much shooting in the dark, and most fighting would settle down once there was no light. Whereas now, thermals, and now Ukraine has a lot more thermal imaging than Russia does because they got flooded. But still, Russia has a lot of thermal imagery they got from stuff America left in Afghanistan. That's helped Russia greatly, thanks to Biden. But both sides do fight through the night, thanks to thermals. And thermals have pretty much caused an increase in the death rate of Ukrainians because they can't hide anymore. Russian thermal imaging. Now, they expected by 25 the Russians would have no working thermal equipment left. That thermal equipment does tend to break down, or the lenses burn out from flashes. But Russia's been able to replace its thermal imaging. Ukraine, of course, can buy it, but they're running out of money. Now, the war of words, of course, is primarily online, not just through social media. Ukraine operates a controversial website, though it claims to be a NGO, which just happens to be registered in Virginia, just happen to have offices in Poland. Ukraine's Miro Tvets, which is Ukrainian for peacekeeper, is an extremist website. It's been branded as such by many, although Russia's the only one who... Primarily, however, this website points out members of the Ukrainian opposition as terrible people. However, there's nothing to suggest... the problem is, it's in Ukrainian, and a lot of them are images with text. Can't translate them. Now, according to some, the UN, Russia's official protest to the UN about this organisation, basically the UN responded by letter, and neither side will officially publish the response. The UN hasn't published their response. Russia's not publishing their response. But this site was launched in 2014 to identify those who allegedly pose a threat to Ukrainian national security. So anybody the Ukrainian government doesn't like, including journalists, artists and politicians, anybody who visited Crimea or the Donbass, foreign journalists who have criticised the Ukrainian administration, or just anybody they don't like has been named. And some of the people on their list have ended up dead. Now, this site has been linked to a number of left-wing organisations in the United States. But because many critics of Ukraine have no power, they have no means to defend themselves, and many of them are members of the Ukrainian opposition, Europe has abandoned them, America has abandoned them. They have nothing but providence to protect them, while Zelensky, with impunity, can deny that this is anything other than private citizens. If Ukraine was supported by and put in, could you imagine under Nixon if this was President Nixon? Remember the left and their moral grandstanding over Cuba and their moral grandstanding over South Vietnam? We don't see any of the left-wing moral grandstanding over Panama or the Panama incursion in 1936. That was America. That was, however, Roosevelt. They attacked the Panama incursion in the 1980s and 1990s, both Republicans. They were horrible incursions, violated the sovereignty of foreign nations. You start to see a pattern yet? If Zelensky wasn't put in office by the left, you think this website wouldn't be nuked by the United States government and its agents never heard or seen from again? Yeah, exactly. You think Ukraine would have got away with murdering journalists if Biden had actually liked those journalists? You notice it's only journalists that Biden didn't like as well. Now, we don't have proof that Ukraine actually committed them. We only have accusations. But the fact that there are accusations and a website that keeps track of people dying is not a very good look. Especially one that has a login for foreign agents. Now, Ukraine, of course, has attacked the Druzhba pipeline, which is providing gas to Hungary from Russia. Ukraine has said it's a legitimate military target, and Hungary said, we have to do something about it. We give them 40% of their electricity, and they respond with strikes on our oil pipeline. We can't let them keep doing that, but they don't know what to do. They can't turn off the power because that won't harm the Ukrainian government. It'll only hurt civilians. And the civilians in Ukraine are not responsible for their government. They have no power over the president. Their president is unelected. He's supported by the army, and the army doesn't answer to the people as well. Of course, they're going to point to the Ukrainian constitution, which conveniently, of course, they ignore the fact that the court has ruled that Zelensky should have stepped down after 90 days. Handed power over, regardless if they can't hold elections. He still shouldn't be in office. Then he shouldn't have any power. He's not elected. The parliament, the Ukrainian constitution was never designed or never expected. It was deliberately designed with loopholes. Now, of course, as I said, Russia has denied that it fired the drones. Now we only have... Look at that drone. Look, it's not a big drone. Look at the size of it compared to a man. You're telling me that had enough fuel to travel 700 miles? Yeah. So you're going to tell me that Russians agents went all the way up to the Polish border, launched those drones, and nobody. Russia's saying they were denied they were launched from Russia. Russian Ministry of Defense says, hey, they don't have the range. That they targeted weapons production facilities in Western Ukraine, but within range. Poland has claimed an act of aggression 19 times, but they can't prove it. They have to actually provide evidence that identify these drones as Russians coming from Russia. Though they have image of debris, that doesn't prove that's a Russian drone. And we know that the EU has instantly believed Poland. NATO, of course, scrambled jets and sent Patriot systems to Poland. Kremlin says it didn't happen, that it was provocation. Belarus has claimed the Polish military... Minsk claims they alerted the Polish military about these drones, saying that it was tracking Russian and Ukrainian drones for mutual strikes, and that they'd lost track as a result of both parties' electronic warfare. Belarus also claims to have shut down some of the strays. But again, we don't have proof. But we do know Ukraine has repeatedly called for NATO action, so-called defensive action, to promote Ukraine to a member of NATO and enact collective defense. Now, I don't know anything about Charlie Kirk's death beyond what has been reported in the media. a lot of the media, and I've seen some hateful comments, are not fans or friends of Charlie Kirk. I don't know if these claims are true. I am hoping to spark conversations so that people will speak out and provide information. Did Charlie Kirk call Crimea part of Russia? Did Charlie Kirk support an end to the war? We do know that Charlie Kirk was not a friend of Zelensky. I believe he argued that Zelensky was hindering the peace process. But right now, trying to find out exact quotes from Charlie Kirk, the problem is search engine results. Again, there is a massive attempt to censor search engine results. Now, Charlie died in hospital, so he can't speak for or defend himself. It's a dark murder, a dark moment for the United States. But if this war escalates, or if Ukraine was involved, it is going to tear America apart. But we already know there are lies and cover-ups that Ukrainians that may have been involved in other actions in the United States, for which there is only accusations or tentative information. But Charlie's words, we cannot compromise with evil. Cannot coexist with evil. The left don't consider it evil, however. They consider it freedom. They consider Satan a rebel. Remember, Chomsky calls for Americans to question all power except the left. But remember, under Biden, remember, whoops, there are more now questions than answers. We know Ukraine was started by Obama. We know Biden and the European Union, we know, are pushing for more sanctions on Russia than makes sense, because all it will do, and it has done, proven, is cut Russia off from Europe. What happened to peace with Russia? That's gone out the window. That went out the window when Obama was elected. All those resources you allegedly want. Is the real war about who digs up those resources? Nobody's asked the people of the Donbass. Thank you for watching. I know I've given you more questions and answers, but I'm hoping that people will wake up and realize that these wars are not because we're fighting some great evil. Okay? You're not fighting the Nazis. America did nothing about so many governments over the years. You keep grandstanding about human rights, but all we see is petty politics, grandstanding, virtue signaling. We see coups and illegal deals. We see whistleblowers under Biden silenced. How many lies must be told before you put your foot down and say, enough's enough? But unfortunately, so many Americans think that free speech is the right to lie. So many people support Ukraine because they want to feel sorry for something. They want something to, some higher purpose, they believe, that they are going to save the world. But the reality is worse. Because the reality is they're useful idiots. I don't support either side. But I do ask for your support. Thank you for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I wish you all a safe and happy life. But don't give up the effort to stop this war. More people need to put the politics out of their mind and say, enough's enough. There's a deal on the table. Ukraine won't sign it. And everybody's making excuses for Ukraine. Everybody's talking about security guarantees. Well, where were those security guarantees for the people of Donbass when they were being rounded up? Where's the media when Donbass was being rounded up? And I'm not blaming Zelensky for everything, but he ran on making peace and he didn't keep his word. How many more politicians have to break their word? Everybody keeps moralizing about Republicans. Oh, Republicans don't keep their word. Yet how many times we see time and time again. All Democrats care about is more taxes, more money, forcing you to pay more money so they can send it overseas. Of course, never disclosing how much they get from these organisations. How many kickbacks and lobbyists. How many $1 million donors like Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos and George Soros have gotten rich because they get government contracts? How many things must go wrong before you decide we have to take a stand and make things right? You really want to make the world a better place? As Jordan Peterson said, start by cleaning your room.